Hello and welcome to our next episode of Talk the Hind Leg of Horse. I am Casey McKenna and this is Georgie Welch, and we are running this series on everything about horses, all disciplines, the horse world in general, and we're hoping to spark a bit of conversation, get a bit of feedback from you guys, and anything you want to know, by all means ping us an email
or a message
either or on socials. Right, last time I was in the hot seat. I had to answer the questions which we will be asking all of our guests that come on the show, and so I was kind of the test dummy. And now it's Georgie's turn. So, right.
I will try not to bore everybody.
I'm sure you won't. Right, so Georgie, when did your equestrian life begin?
Well, my obsession with horses began when I was like 5 or 6, and my dad brought me home Black Beauty on a VHS. You remember the old one with Sean Bean in it?
Yeah.
And I was like obsessed since then with the dancing ponies and the big black beautiful horses.
Yeah.
And I just spent, my dad was a farmer. Like I said in previous episodes, we weren't the most affluent, so couldn't afford a pony, couldn't really afford riding lessons. So I just basically used to beg for the odd groom of a horse or a cuddle of a horse or a ride if I was really, really lucky, in exchange for an awful lot of poo picking.
Yeah.
Which actually, yeah, exactly, I'm sure. But it kind of, because I didn't get the opportunity to really do a lot of riding when I was younger, I think it kind of took me more down the alternative route right from the start, because I didn't get into pony club. I didn't get into the riding clubs or the, riding schools or competitive riding or even regular lessons. I mean, I could probably tell you I didn't actually learn to, not that I can properly ride, but, learn to ride until I was an adult, until I had my own horse, because I just spent time looking after as many horses as I could, just because I loved being around them. I'm one of those woo-woo people that I love horses because I love the way they make me feel. Like, being around my horses is my de-stressing. Yeah. It's the thing that I go home and just cuddle my pony and sit in a field. Like, I've just been away for 4 days, sitting on a hill in Derbyshire, rope wiggling and playing with ponies. But oh my God, it was the best thing ever. We spent literally all day, every day outside. The only time we sat in the horse lorry was when we were sleeping. And it was just being with the horses, and it's just the recuperation of the soul. So I've kind of gone off subject there. But yeah, early from just admiring the beauty that is horses. And then that kind of progressed into...
And then what then made you become a saddler?
So I don't want to repeat myself, because I'm conscious that we've spoken briefly about this in the previous episodes, but we couldn't afford horses, so the only way that I could kind of afford them was I bought a foal as my first horse. Silly mistake, but not really a mistake, I guess. I learned an awful lot from it because I had to. I got into the natural horsemanship world, and from there you end up being offered horses quite regularly, as I'm sure you do in your world as well. Trouble horses that got problems, and I very quickly realised that most of those problems actually stemmed from discomfort of some description, and unfortunately the saddle is a big proponent to that. As I started learning about saddle fit and more about saddles and how they're made and how they're constructed, I actually started then analysing more about the effect that the rider sat on top of the saddle has. So I guess I realised, because I'm one that seems to attract complicated things in my life, and there can't be much more complicated than saddle fitting, to be honest. No,
I would definitely agree with that. Definitely agree with that.
Trying to take two biological organisms and trying to put a static element in between the two of them.
Yeah, it's very hard.
That has to absorb or help all of the forces that both the rider applies to the horse and the horse applies to the rider. Yeah. It's very complex. thing, really. And I think sometimes people over simplify it.
Yeah. Well, and also when you then add into the mix, when you've got, you know, riders can be very specific about their saddles and what they do like and what they don't like.
Yeah, absolutely.
As can the horses. And there are horses, there is no set.
Nope.
You know, you can't, you know, the theory is all good and well, but it doesn't always apply.
No, absolutely.
Because there's always that horse that what should work, they don't like.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's
I think I realised that quite early on in saddle fitting is when I truly understood saddles from it's not about the brand. It's, you know, you can have the best fitting saddle in the world, but if the person fitting it doesn't understand, then it still won't be the best saddle fit in the world. And once you do start understanding the different proponent items of the saddle, you then start seeing the subtle changes that can make all the difference for horses. Like I always talk to, when I teach saddle fitting to other people, I talk about it's really millimeters and small, tiny changes that can make massive difference to horses. Whereas I think some of the people out there that are teaching it from a much bigger perspective, and they're trying, again, oversimplifying it. And as we know, looking after horses is not a simple task.
Not that simple.
Like nothing about them is simple.
Well, and not to mention the fact that, you know, as you say, you're talking about saddles fitting, you know, millimeters can make a difference. But obviously, you know, you leave your horse in the field all day and it has a good old belly full of grass and it's been out for a few days, whatever, hasn't worked, its shape will be slightly different to if it's working every day. So, you know, depending on what the horse has been doing, you know, you get a horse, especially when you look at things like event horses who, you know, after an event, they're often a very different shape to, especially a 3-day, to when they went to that event. You know, they
endurance horses.
Yeah, endurance horses, exactly. You know, they strip out, they become leaner. So then, of course, what did fit all of a sudden doesn't fit.
Absolutely.
So, but I think that was a point that we wanted to make as well with, in general, for, you know, anybody who is riding a horse, you don't need to be a saddler, but just having a basic understanding of, you know, what fits, what doesn't fit, and also, you know, are you hurting your horse by using that saddle, you know, or is it maybe not perfect, but you're not doing any real harm? So I think, you know, definitely, you know, understanding in a basic way is quite important. Well,
and I think on that, as like, I know that it probably might overcomplicate things, but to me, I just very often the horse decides. I mean, I can turn up very often with saddle fitting, and I will choose, you know, so I'll start statically, the horse will just be stood there. I'll plonk saddles on, I'll assess the back, I'll palpate the back, and then I'll put saddles on, and I'll choose some saddles to use based on, you know, the shape of the back, the shape of the shoulder blade, the movability of the shoulder blade, the ability for the horse to engage its core, and actually judging its top line and how well put together and or not it is. Once you've put those saddles on, you then go, okay, well, I like the tree shape, I like the panel shape, but it could do with a tweaking here, a tweaking there. But ultimately, my goal is to get anything between sort of 2 and 5 saddles that I know, in theory,
could work
quite nicely for that horse, but they've all got subtle variations. Like for the rider, it might be a different knee block, or a different pommel height, or a different cantle angle, or a different waist size in the seat. And for the horse, it could be a slightly different panel material, it could be a slightly different angle of the tree, it could be, you know, all of those things have an impact. And it's astonishing to me. I mean, some of the biggest changes I've had have been minuscule changes, and the horses and the riders instantly feel the difference. And, you know, I mean, it's quite regular to have clients like in tears because they knew there was something more that this horse was offering or had, but they couldn't unlock it because it just wasn't feeling that comfortable. You know, you got to think this saddle it has a massive amount of force put onto it. You know, the leverages and the forces that a rider applies to it, and then that horse's back then has to absorb because.
And that's not necessarily anything to do with the rider's weight, is it?
Absolutely.
And size. I mean, even a small, lightweight rider, you know, obviously they don't have the weight, but nevertheless, especially, you know, jumping when they're coming down from a fence. I mean, like the research they've done into that is, you know. So, if you could give your young self some advice, what would it be?
That's a difficult one for me, because I don't want this to sound egotistical at all, but I've always lived. I remember reading an audiobook years ago, or a book, something I heard, and it was written by a lady who did palliative care.
Right.
And she said that every single one of her patients, they always regretted stuff they didn't do rather than they did.
Yeah.
So I've always tried to live by that. Like if I'm not upsetting anybody and I'm going to try and help somebody or help something, then I will try and do it. For advice, it would probably be to follow that and follow your gut, listen to your gut. And I don't know. Yeah, that's a difficult one for me, because I don't know. I mean, probably more that you are more capable than you think you are. Like I'm not a very strong rider because I haven't done a huge amount of it. But I can also still get on a horse and make it improve something. But I don't believe in myself, and so I think, oh, I'm not confident, or I can't do that. So it then puts that doubt in your mind.
Yeah, but I think self-belief is a big thing for, I mean, it doesn't just apply to horses, but I think self-belief is a big thing, isn't it, with people when they're riding. It often is, you know, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not good enough for this horse, or the horse is more capable than I am, or whatever it is. And, you know, and that little bit of doubt can be quite kind of damaging, you know. I mean, I know, especially from the eventing perspective, you know, there's always those cross-country courses you'd walk and you'd think, oh, crikey, you know, or that's a bit big, or that's a bit technical, or, you know, your horse maybe has an issue with something that's in the course. You know, you have to have that belief when you come out of the start box that you and your horse are going to be able to jump around the course. Of course. Because otherwise you're riding slightly negatively, and then they know. And I think that's, you know, but it's the same with everything with horses. I think confidence is really important. And, you know, if nothing else, you know, fake it till you make it. So, you know, at least pretend like you know what you're doing. Even if you're not quite sure, then just think, right, well, you know, I'll give it a go.
Did that answer the question? Is that the right kind of answer?
I think so, yeah. I think that answers the question.
Don't know.
So, what do you love about the horse world, and what don't you like about the horse world?
Horses. I love horses, and I
glad you said you love them and you don't hate them.
No, God, no. I mean, it can be that sometimes, just trying to figure out what the issue is at that time. No, I love horses, and I'm definitely a person that, like I say, again, repeating, I love being around horses. Don't necessarily, I mean, I haven't ridden for 2.5 years because I lost my heart horse. And other various situations, but anyway, so what don't I like about it is that people, I mean, I get told quite regularly, or asked quite, oh, I wish they spoke English, or I wish they spoke, and I'm like, but they do. It's up to us to learn their language. You don't move to a foreign country and then just expect everybody to learn English. I mean, some people do.
A lot of the English do, to be fair.
True. You know, it's up to us to learn what they're trying to communicate. And yes, sometimes that is very difficult. But I also kind of enjoy that challenge. I think you have to enjoy that aspect of it. So I would wish that more people would understand that they're a sentient being and they're not just an item that you just chuck a saddle on and off you go. I do think that is definitely lessening nowadays. And so I'd like to see that continue more for sure. I think that's about right.
So you'd like people to be more educated, more understanding.
Well, that's why we're doing this, right? Absolutely. Because we want people to, you know,
think outside of the box sometimes.
And also don't be scared of questioning things. And, you know, I mean, I've had it before where I've recommended bodyworkers to people, bodyworkers that I know are very, very good, and they'll come back to me and go, well, why did she tell me this? And I was like, but why you ask her or them? You don't be scared to ask things.
And also don't be afraid that if sometimes just because you're told something doesn't make it true. So, you know, you have to kind of make your own mind up. You have to, you know, take on board what people say, listen to your experts, listen to people's experience, think about, you know, what they're saying and why they're saying it. But if you feel, you know, is that true? You know, is that right? You can always, you know, there's a lot of information out there nowadays. You know, you can always kind of think, okay, well, maybe I'll ask a couple more opinions from a couple of other professionals, get different people's takes on things.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, you know, I mean, I certainly know I've kind of formed my opinions on a lot of things through listening to multiple people's experience and their expertise,
and then developing your own
and then developing my own kind of take on that, taking a bit from here and a bit from there. You know? Same as really you should do if you're, you know, if you're training, you know, riding horses and training with somebody. That little bit of, you know, a little bit of that person, a little bit of that person. You have to be your own person.
Staying open-minded, right? I mean, I guess that's probably my biggest bugbear is that certain aspects of the equestrian world can become quite close-minded. They've kind of decided that's what there is right. And I think really to be there for the horse, you can't make that decision because what you might have made a decision on for one horse, you could go to and it's actually, oh well, that's not going to work today, or you know, just be open-minded for everybody to share their experiences, whether that's the horse itself or other professionals. Yeah,
and I think a good quote that I heard years ago, and I believe it was Kira Kirkland who said it, was if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And I think that's very true. You know, I definitely know with, you know, even how I train horses, how I go about doing things, my systems have slightly changed because you kind of think, okay, well, that's how I used to do it, but actually, oh, maybe I'm going to try this and actually, oh, that's actually worked better. So then that becomes a part of your system.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but as long as your system, whatever you're doing, remains consistent, then
absolutely,
that's fine.
There's always variations within any system, and there's different tangents. It's like one of those spider graphs, isn't it? Yes, no, oh, this direction and that direction, because that's, you have to put something out there with the horse and see if that works. No, it didn't. Okay, change tangent and find something else. So, but that does come from that kind of open-minded.
Well, and it also comes from a massive catalogue of experience.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
You know, and that's the hard thing with this you know, this world of horses is, unfortunately, you know, the older you get, the better you get at it. You know, because you understand it more. You have better knowledge, and you know, knowledge is power. Okay, so how do you think the horse world has changed since you started?
I think that the veterinary advances are amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, look how many horses we're finding with these new problems, but more consistent. I mean, they're not necessarily new problems. Horses have had them all along. It's just, you know, when I was a kid, it was like, well, that's a bad horse, or that's a bad egg, it's a bad problem. It's, you know, and
just a naughty horse.
It's a naughty horse, and it was either sent off to the hunt, and if the hunt couldn't deal with it, then it was just destroyed. You know, and I, sometimes that may not be necessarily the worst thing in the world, but there is so much more medical advances now, thanks to the racing industry and thanks to commercial equestrianism, because without that aspect, the money wouldn't be there for these things to be researched on. And
I think that's a very valid point, that, you know, there are people who maybe frown upon the racing industry, sports horses, competing horses, you know, which I understand, but maybe if they looked at, you know, their horse, and perhaps they don't compete it, perhaps do whatever, you know, they should think about, you know, have they, you know, when they've had to have the vet out to their horse, you know, would that vet have known what to do to help their horse had it not been for these industries that, as you say, have ploughed so much money into research, into, you know, improving horse welfare and their well-being, and what you can do to help them and you know, improve them. So I think it you know, it's very hard to kind of take a stance sometimes like that without you've got to accept that there is the horse industry and the horse world is massive, and so much has gone into it from different angles. But
I mean, I had that experience this last week. Actually, I was teaching at one of the colleges I teach at, and there was 16 students. They were all second year veterinary physio or equine management, but touching on bodywork and stuff students, and I was there teaching them and how to assess saddle fit. And and a couple of them were very kind of anti-commercial aspect of horses and very anti kind of racing, and and how can it still go on, and I was just like, I don't dispute that there are elements of certain sports that I'd like to see change, but I don't want to see competition gone completely. And I certainly wouldn't want to see age-old traditional sports and see their demise because we aren't open enough to make those changes that, from a welfare standard, from a veterinary, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what, breeding, everything. But I mean, I think that those things that have changed in that respect, I mean, we are able to treat and deal with so much more now and help so many more horses with these conditions, and conditions that some would say, well, yes, actually, but if they weren't being ridden this way, weren't being trained that way, they wouldn't have these conditions. And that may be the case in some situations, but actually some of the scientists now, or anatomists that are not necessarily vets, but the research and hundreds upon almost thousands of dissections they're doing are finding that these problems are prominent in horses that have never even been touched by a human, let alone ridden or competed or anything. Kissing spines happens in all types of horses.
It's the same with stomach ulcers, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The research has done into that, and young horses that have never been given any concentrate food, have just lived in a field, and even 2 years old, they've got stomach ulcers.
Well, even weaning causes ulcers. So, there isn't anything, and we can't really avoid certain stresses in horses' lives in general. Leaving their mum is a stressful thing to do.
And depending on the horse's temperament, nature, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, all of that, right? I mean, some horses are going to respond or be affected by certain things more than others because they're more sensitive, no different than humans, really. But I think that's the biggest thing that's changed. I mean, although not necessarily all in the good thing sometimes, when I was a kid, when we had to start getting the bigger horses fitter from like the hunting season or anything else, or when I was riding the some of the local farmers' horses, we always were taught we did road work. We conditioned the ligaments and the tendons and the bones. Not that they called it that because they didn't know what they were doing but they did the road work.
But they'd say, it's hardening work.
Absolutely.
Toughening their
Nobody
legs.
really does that nowadays. And then we're seeing more and more damages happening when the ground gets hard. I mean, we have such an extreme range in this country of, we spend 6 months of the year in a quagmire and 6 months with almost concrete,
especially around here where it's clay soil.
I mean, where are we in May, and people have been the farmers have been irrigating since mid of April, end of April. The fields are cracked, and so I think some traditional aspects have been lost that will actually serve a purpose. But the biggest thing I see is the advances in medical advantages in the veterinary world for horses. And I'm not also saying that all of them should be carried out all the time either, but I think without doing that and without experimenting and without looking into it and having a commercial aspect that pays for it, we don't know that.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
We don't know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the only way that human medicine has come on is
they
try. It might work, it might not. And
absolutely.
If the things that work, they keep doing. The things that don't, they stop doing.
Do
you think there are any fundamental issues with the horse world?
I think I might have touched on a few. I think there's difficult because I teach saddle fitting and I've been to many countries all over the world, and each culture is different. When you go to certain countries and they don't have the tradition of horse racing, or they don't have the tradition of being a highly sport motivated through horses, they become a nation of horse lovers, and therefore they don't have the advantages in the training and the aspect of things that they can access. But in this country, one thing I don't like as a professional is that I've seen almost I don't know how to say this, I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but it's become this, well, I just call the professional, it's up to them to deal with it, so I don't have to. Like, you know, for me, to be able to know whether you've got a good professional or not, you need to have a certain
understanding. And I think, and we've said about this before, you know, being a horse person rather than just a horse owner. And I think that's something, you know, I know we've had these conversations. I feel as a professional, especially, you know, I should have an understanding of all of the other professions within that I'm using.
Same here.
So you need to have an understanding. And you need to be able to, you know, to ask questions. You know, I mean, I've asked lots of questions to lots of people. And then you build up a bit more. You know, you can give a better judgment on things, can't you?
Absolutely.
You know? And you're not just going on, well, you know, my mate down the road said, oh, this person's all right, and then you use them, and then you kind of go, right, that's fine, until someone comes along and says, actually, they've really not done a very good job. You know, it's...
I mean, there is an element of, I mean, most of my work is word of mouth, because I don't, up until now, I don't really do social media. And I've always just built it word of mouth. And I guess because I'm a straight talker, I don't tend, and so those people that recommend me end up doing so because I also tell the truth. You know, and so that becomes a big element of what people actually like.
Well, I mean, you don't want somebody, especially, you know, if you're investing in a saddle, which nowadays are not cheap, you don't want someone just to sell you what they've got in the back of the van because they want to sell it. You want to believe that, you know, this is actually going to work. You want someone that will turn around to you and say, well, actually, you know, look,
I don't have it.
None of these fit. You know, you'll need to go down this road or that road or whatever, and give you advice that isn't just about, you know, selling. You know, and really everybody, I mean, all professionals should be doing that. I think, you know?
I mean,
it's
completely
the same for me. I mean, I've had to have the awkward conversations with people when a horse has come in an arena and I feel it's not quite sound or it's not suitable for that rider, and I've had to say, you know, look, I don't think this is going to work, or I think you need to, you know, get in touch with your vet or your saddler or your physio or whoever it might be that I would feel might be able to help them, and then, you know, hopefully they take that on board. What are your hopes for the future of the horse world?
My hopes are that we start seeing horse owners that are questioning things a little bit more. You know, I mean, we've just had this talk about vets. I don't mean to pick on vets at all. It's just an item that's, you know, that all of us have had to deal with, no matter what we do in the horse world, or even any pet that we own, we've had to deal with vets. And as we know, veterinary care in this country is extremely expensive. You know, absolutely. I've got a certain element of clients that are choosing to get stuff done to their horses abroad or whatever, because it's actually cheaper. You know, so what was the question again? Sorry, got distracted. What would I like to see?
What are your hopes for the future of the horse world?
So I think that kind of leads into what I was saying about actually having horse owners that aren't scared to question, like we've probably already said. And one thing, you know, I tell clients very regularly, if I feel that the vet has maybe missed something or not missed something, I'm not trying to diagnose. I understand that's not my role, but you know, I've had it numerous times now over the last 20 years that I've gone, there's just something not right with this horse, and it's seen one, maybe two vets, and they've said, oh no, there's nothing wrong, and then 6 months, a year later, it's hopping lame and having to have surgery and it's ligaments, or do you know what I mean, whatever, because nobody's thought to question. And I have to kind of encourage my clients to go, You don't have to use that vet. Just because they're your vet that you use to get your vaccinations done doesn't mean that that's what you have to do. And if a vet wants to refer you, you don't also have to go with their referral. You can actually go do your research. You know, my girl needed a Hobday tie back years ago. And I was like, well, I'm not just going to get anybody to do this. So I researched and I found a lady. She may not be the best, but she certainly was the experience that I could access, that travels around Europe, and that's all she does. You know, so I wanted somebody that was their specialisation, not just, oh, that's a surgery day and we'll just put it in there. So I think my hope would be that we can encourage horsemanship and knowledge to the average owner, or to any owner, to then kind of start questioning, well, actually, is that right? Is that the norm?
But I think, you know, it's a very hard thing to do when you're not, especially when you're not that experienced, you know, because when you're not that experienced, you don't know.
No.
I mean, I'm sure, you know, when I was younger, I thought I knew everything because I was an arrogant little... We'll bleep that out. But you know, but you. I mean, horses are very humbling. In that respect.
Aren't they just?
But I think you know, it is hard when you're very really relying on professionals to give you sound advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, we're not picking on any of the
Good not. I didn't mean it to come out that way.
But I think it's no different to, you know, the same way you get good GPs, not so good GPs. You get, you know, good workmen, not very good workmen. You know, you might have someone lay you a patio and it's great, and someone lays a patio and it's dreadful. You know, in the end, some people are just really good at their job and what they do, and some people just aren't great. And you know, I think there is a slight expectation in the horse world that all professionals within the horse world must be excellent at what they do. And don't get me wrong, majority of them are. And they've worked very hard to do that. But there are some who perhaps, you know, aren't necessarily in it for the right reasons, or, you know, perhaps they're a little bit outdated in their thinking, you know, and they haven't moved on with the industry.
Maybe. I mean, yes, there's an element of that. I think for me, my biggest, and this is a personal thought, but some of the, like you mentioned, the fake it till you make it, there can be a lot of ego and bravado, and that I know what I'm talking about. Well, you've been doing it for 5 years. How can you possibly know everything? You know, and also the fact that you're telling me you know all the answers just actually makes me go, no.
You probably don't.
You don't. Because if...
Well, and I think the thing is, though, is it is being able to be humble enough to, you know, even when you get to a point in your career where you feel like you do know a hell of a lot, and a hell of a lot more than a lot of people, to still go, okay, I got that wrong. You know, that wasn't, absolutely. You know, that wasn't necessarily, you know, maybe I could have approached that in a different way. Maybe, you know, I should try this. Or you just hear of something that you think, I'll give that a go. You know, again, it's the open-mindedness, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know,
it's just, you took the words out of my mouth. It is that, it's, oh, okay, well, that didn't work this time, but I'll learn it for next time, and I'll, you know, next, and you can't, we're human, right? We can't get it right 100% of the time, and horses are complicated creatures, as we've just been discussing. So they are. I'm going to add on to that, just as a personal hope for the future, is that, and I know this is difficult as well, because there are, like you've just said, there are good saddle fitters and there are bad saddle fitters, and there's sales reps and there's saddlers, and there's all different people that are responsible for the saddle, but I'm seeing a huge amount of things that are being blamed on the saddle. And the saddle solely. You know, I had an instance myself quite recently where the horse was sore in its back. It was sore in its back since I've seen it. I've been referring them to a bodyworker. I've referred them to the vet, was because I wasn't overly happy with the way it was moving behind. And, you know, experience over the years has taught me that if they're not quite right behind, then you tend to get a lot of tension into that sort of thoracolumbar junction in the back behind the saddle. And then that can lead into pain further along the back. It doesn't necessarily mean the back's the problem. But, you know, the way the kinetic lines and the muscle chains work would imply that if you've got a kink somewhere, that something else is going to be upset. So I had this experience, and the body worker I can't remember who they were, what they were, but they'd been out and they were saying, oh, you know, it's the saddle causing this problem. And I'm like, I don't think it is, because this horse was already like this before it was in this saddle, and we'd already referred. So anyway, it turns out the client then did take the horse to a vet, and it's now had shockwave therapy and everything else on its deep digital flexor tendons. So there was something going on. There was an underlying issue, but that bodyworker instantly went to blame the saddle. And
but I think that's a valid point. I think that's a point that I think we see a lot of within the horse world is, you know, somebody blaming somebody else for something that's wrong. And I think in the end, you've got to look at it from a very holistic point of view.
Absolutely.
You know, so, okay, the saddle fit might not be quite right. Especially, you know, when you've got somebody who's then coming back to you, I'm sure, when they're saying, you know, oh, the saddle keeps going one way. Well, then you've got to kind of question, okay, so, you know, most saddles are not going to go one way if either the horse or the rider isn't sending them one way. So then it's that thing of, you know, does the horse need to see a physio? Does it need to see a vet? You know, does the rider need to see a physio? You know, is there something that is going wrong here? Do they need better training? Are they just not riding the horse in a way that will build the horse evenly and keep a saddle straight? So, you know, I mean, I sympathise with a lot of the professionals within the industry, and I understand there are quite a few of them that do get fed up with constantly having people ring up and saying, oh, well, it's your fault, this has gone wrong. And it's like, well, okay, and we're losing a
lot of good professionals for that very kind of, I mean, I know we're going to discuss maybe that a little bit more in the next episode, but sometimes the question can be a bit negative. And I think maybe, again, going back to that open mindset of thinking, okay, actually, is one thing ever to blame or one person ever to blame? We know it's a culmination of different elements with horses that makes them work. So therefore, why can it not be a culmination of different things that cause problems? And don't get me wrong, I understand that, you know, a really dismal saddle fit can cause very sore backs and a lot of problems. But I rarely see something that atrocious nowadays. You know, we have a good education system, and there's many different kind of colleges and stuff in that respect, but we're still seeing saddles being blamed, and also other professionals blaming other professionals. Like, it's really not on. The thing that I say wherever I teach, no matter what college I'm teaching at or wherever I'm teaching, I sort of, the first thing, I have this little lecture as I sit there and say, it's like, I don't care what you're learning. What I care about is that you learn to work as a team. You know, if you aren't happy with the saddle fit that's going on, or if you're not happy with the way the shoes or the feet are looking, pick up the phone. Be a human, pick up the phone, have a conversation with the other professional. Because nobody intentionally does a bad job or intentionally causes harm.
I mean, everybody's trying to do what they believe is the right thing to do. You know, so I absolutely agree with that.
So a pony, I can hear hoof beats.
There's a horse riding up the drive. So on that note, we should thank Codden Park Equestrian.
Oh yes.
This is actually where I'm based. But as you can see, it's not a show day today. The arena is empty and it's all prepared. I think they've got British show jumping on here tomorrow. And we thought it might be a nice spot to sit in the sunshine and do some filming. So so thank you very much.
The irony that we're in front of the arena when we're talking about the rope wiggler and not the competitive rider.
It's slightly ironic. Anyway, so we hope you've enjoyed, and we hope you've learnt something, or maybe it's made you question something. Maybe you want to shoot in a load of questions or abuse, you know, by all means, we'll take it.
We'll ignore your abuse, but whatever.
So, you know, but we would love to hear your opinions, and we'd love to hear about anything that you feel you want us to talk about. Our email is talkthehindlegoffahorse@gmail.com, and you'll be able to find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, where else are we? LinkedIn. TikTok, you know.
As many of the platforms
have a peruse
as we can manage.
And you'll find us somewhere. So next time I think we're talking about the good, the bad and the ugly of social media. So could have some interesting things brought up there.
Yeah. Thank you for listening for me dribble on, and I hope I haven't bored you. And I look forward to kind of sharing our journey as we start meeting different people and going from there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you all again soon, hopefully.
You won't have to just put up with the two of us for too much longer. There will be episodes with other people, promise. Anyway, that's great, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.